What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Consuming Crime. It's your host, Jules, here. Hey, how's it going? How are you? It's been a while. So first and foremost, you guys blow me away with you guys. Like, okay, so I haven't posted, and listen, I'm here to stay. You're going to see me every week. I have a camera. I got my mic. I got my setup. Every complaint I had about content creation prior is no longer a complaint. But I have to shout out my listeners and people that have been tuning in for the last, honestly, special focus on 2024 because the growth has been bananas. I mean, there's so many of you. It's not like, oh my God, I'm like famous, but I don't care about that. I care about the fact that there's people tuning in. And let me get to the numbers, okay? Because I got my 2024 wrapped for creators for Consuming Crime. And I'm just blown away. 86% of your listeners discovered you this year. Hi! 86% of you, 14% of you. Thank you for listening. Where in the world have you been? You guys, this is my favorite part. It's my favorite part. 2024, your show traveled the globe. You were streamed in 25 countries. You are a top 5 show for 126 fans. And you're the number 1 show for 20 fans. With that all being said, that was my 2024 wrap for Consuming Crime. I don't even know where to begin. I think like starting off the show obviously was like something that me and my coworker wanted to do. She's no longer part of the show, but I can still text her right meow. I can call her right meow. I'm sure she would be very happy for the podcast if she knew. It just turned into something that I honestly never thought it would be. And I'm so excited to see the growth over the next year. We'll see where we are. Honestly, you guys are amazing for tuning in. And in the last 30 days, I want to thank my listeners for 616 streams, 168 consumption hours, and 22 new followers this month. Shout out to 22 of you. Today, we are going to get into the case of JonBenét Ramsey. I'm sure you guys have heard this case. If you have not, you'll hear about it today. This might be my last time covering a case that involves a child as a victim because I'm not going to lie to you guys, this case is really heavy and it's a lot. And it's going to be a lot. So trigger warning if you get triggered to hearing about child abuse or sexual assault or obviously murder, don't tune into this episode. I am going to cover the case in today's episode, and I am going to launch an extended version of this episode on my Patreon. It won't be like a part 1, part 2, where you're only going to get half the story and you get the rest in the Patreon. It's going to be, I cover everything in the episode, and then I'll dive into like theories and interviews. For example, like JonBenét's father, John, recently did an interview with Crime Junkie, and I will be discussing that on the Patreon. But as far as the case in and of itself, we are going to get into the nitty gritty today. And I'm not going to lie to you guys, I had a theory before I looked into it, and now honestly, I'm even more confused. Let's just jump right into it. First and foremost, my sources. So I listened to Crime Junkie. They did a 3-hour episode on JonBenét Ramsey, and theirs was very detailed, which I appreciate. If you want the full, I will not be getting that detailed today, but if you want the full 911 calls played, all of that, Crime Junkies, they did a really good job at covering it. I also listened to True Crime Obsessed version of it, which is interesting because their version's kind of different than this version. I did not watch the Netflix documentary because I'm hearing there's a lot of critiques on it being biased, so I'm actually going to leave it alone. If I do make a part 2, it'll just be about I might put that on the Patreon. I really only want to have 1 episode on the regular feed of this. So without further ado, let's get into the case. All right, guys, if the angle changed a little bit on the camera, I'm sorry. I had to change like the dummy battery so it wouldn't die on me. I would have started with that, but I thought the battery was going to last a little longer. Anyway, No technical difficulties in this episode. All right. So anyway, let's get right into it. So the episode starts off with a call from Patsy Ramsey, who's the mother in this case, and I will be referring to her as Patsy going forward. And she's on the phone with 911, and she's clearly panicking. She's like, "My daughter, somebody took her. There's a note right here. It says," and the 911 dispatcher is very much like, "Ma'am, just try to relax, starts calling her by her first name, I think maybe because she told her first name. And then she's like, what does the note say? And mom's like, I barely read it. I don't know. Just somebody come, And click, hangs up the phone. So this was on December 26th in 1996 at 5:52 in the morning. This 911 phone call made to Boulder police. Mom called, Patsy proceeded to then call 2 other families to come over. The families consisted of the Whites and the Steins. Remember the Whites. Just remember that last name, White, because it's going to come into play a little bit later. So the note read, if you call the police, they're going to hurt JonBenet, which was their 6-year-old daughter. And they had 2 kids. Patsy and John had 2 kids. JonBenet Ramsey, who was 6 years old, and Burke, who was 9 years old. And at this exact moment, they claimed that Burke was upstairs sleeping. They did not wake him up. What happened was, Patsy's account of the night was that she came downstairs, saw the note, and then went to check to see if JonBenet was in her bedroom, and she was not. So that's when she said she called the police. So they did have an alarm system. However, it wasn't on. But it wasn't one of those things where it just wasn't on that night. It hadn't been on for like weeks. Like I guess it just broke and they never bothered to fix it type of thing. So officers end up showing up, and I want to say within minutes. And they do a skim of the home. They say they don't notice any forced entry at first glance. However, at this point, it's important to note that because it's being treated as a kidnapping and not yet a murder, homicide, officers roaming everywhere, the Ramsey families roaming everywhere, the Whites, the Steins, they're just contaminating everything. Because, of course, at this point, nobody knows that this isn't, nobody knows. So let's move on. So Patsy's in one room, crying with her friends or the other family. Meanwhile, John is working with detectives and speaking to detectives. And they take special note for some reason. The officers take special note that the parents are separated because in their mind, if you guys just lost your daughter, wouldn't you want to be clinging on to each other? Because you're both kind of grieving the kidnapping of your daughter. That's kind of their thinking. But the Boulder police, you will notice, is very... whether the family did it or not, whatever your theory is, it was kind of giving that the police were only looking at them, even though it's like, okay, can we look at the family and other people? Like, which maybe they were doing, but this is just the way that the story was told. So, dad is working, talking with detectives. Dad goes into the basement at some point around 10 in the morning. And he doesn't see anything. Here he doesn't claim to see anything. He also, there's talks that he went to like the basement window and closed it for some reason. All right, so the only room that's not being contaminated at this point is JonBenet's room. Her room is the only one that is closed off. And so at this point, they're expecting a call from the kidnapper because the kidnapper indicated in the note that they are going to be calling around 6 o'clock. And initially, my thoughts were, oh, they're not calling at 10 because the ransom note was fake. That was like my initial thinking. But then I'm really trying to play devil's advocate with the intruder theory. As far as what I actually believe happened, I'll get into that more on the Patreon. The biggest thing is I don't know. I really don't know. The note is weird. I agree that it's weird. But, all right, so... listen carefully. We are a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction. We respect your business, but not the country that it serves. At this time, we have your daughter in our possession. She is safe and unharmed, and if you want her to see 1997, you must follow our instructions to the letter. You will withdraw $118,000 from your account. $100,000 will be in $100 bills, and the remaining 18 will be in $20 bills. Make sure you bring an adequate size attaché to the bank. When you get home, you will put the money in a brown paper bag. I will call you between 8 and 10 a.m. tomorrow to instruct you on delivery. And then it goes on a page and a half longer, which, yeah, you guys get the point. But this is a very long note. And the things that are weird about the note, and I'll say this now, even if it's noted later, is the note was written using Patsy's notepad and a pen from Patsy's drawers. On top of that, the pen was put back away where it was found, which is an interesting thing for, you know, and the thing is with the intruder theory is somebody would have to be really comfortable to kind of like, all right, I'm going to get cozy and like write like a 2.5 page thing. It's weird. It's weird. We'll get into that conversation a little bit more when we get into theories. But let's continue. So like I said, like I was saying, they're expecting a call from the kidnapper, but no call, because with the intruder theory, if you're an intruder and you see the cops showed up, you're not going to call. Because obviously you're casing the house. You could see that there's cops outside. You're not going to call. So the father checks again per the detective's instruction because... And again, this is why my sources are kind of weird. Okay, you know what? Forget it. I have multiple sources for this episode, and each source tells a different story. I'm going to tell Crime Junkie's source. I will get into other sources and other theories and other accusations on the Patreon for this. This is Crime Junkie. All right. So, father checks the basement again per the detective's instruction. Per the detective, he said, I want you guys to check top to bottom. As to why he would have the father check and not him himself, the detective, is weird. I don't know. Father decides, actually, you know what? I'm going to do bottom to top. So he actually goes with his buddy, Fleet White, behind him. And this time when he goes under the basement, within 5 minutes, you just hear his screams, his yell. And you see him like a minute later, he just walking up the steps carrying his 6-year-old's lifeless body. And he puts her down on the first floor, and he had tried to get the stuff off of her. He must have thought she was still alive maybe and was trying to get everything off. And then at some point they realized she's no longer with us, so stop touching her body. Everybody stop touching everything. Everybody out. This is now a homicide. So that's when everything shifted. According to the dad, John, he claims that they did cooperate with police until, like, they cooperated with police that day, because at this point it's like the morning of December 26th. And they're cooperating with the police, and then all of a sudden he goes into work, and someone is in his HR department, advised him, hey, the police have tunnel vision and they're going to pin it on you. So you need to lawyer up. So according to John's count. And so he's like, okay. So he calls lawyers, he hires them. And from that point, he's only doing things that the lawyers approve. So if the police want to see him, it needs to be at a certain time. His lawyers need to be present. And it kind of seems from the outside looking in that he's being uncooperative, which I have two different perspectives that completely disagree with each other on this one. Number one, if you're being accused of a crime or you feel like somebody's going to pin something on you, get a lawyer. Get a lawyer, right? On the other end of it, I am a mother. I have a 3-year-old son. I am talking to the police all day and all night. What do you mean? So I'm very like, I would like to think that if I had an inkling that the police were only looking at me and nobody else, I would like to think I'd be like strong enough to be like, hey, this is weird. Can I get a lawyer? Because I don't know what you guys are trying to do. You know what I mean? But I don't know how the police were acting. I don't even know if they were giving off that vibe or if he's just basing it off of what this random person told him. We don't know, but that's because I know that there's people saying, well, they were uncooperative with the police, and they were at the instructions of their lawyers, but it does look weird. It looks weird. It does. So the Ramseys have service on the 28th, and then so they left town. They had already scheduled to leave town in Atlanta, but of course, they're not cooperating with police. They leave town very soon after the murder of their daughter. Everything is just looking weird. So even if it was pre-planned for them to go visit family in Atlanta, it's weird. According to John, he wanted to bury JonBenet in Atlanta, and he wanted her to be buried close to his other daughter who had passed away in a car accident previously. And so that was like the reasoning for going to Atlanta, just so you guys know. So anyway, the 31st is JonBenet's funeral. And you know, now that I think about it, I wonder if her body was at the funeral, because that would mean that from the 26th to the 31st, that would only give coroners 5 days to do an autopsy. I don't know if that's enough time to... That's weird. I don't know if her body was at the funeral, but I just thought about that right now. So after the funeral on the 1st, they go on CNN and they do an interview that just rubbed everybody the wrong way. Patsy she was out of it. She was clearly out of it. I read somewhere that the doctor was prescribing her Valium to help her cope with the situation, but she definitely took a Valium before the interview because, and that's not, to me, that's not an admission of guilt, but you could tell she was under the influence. And she's upset, they're upset, she's crying, she's talking about there's a killer on the loose, and people ask, why did you guys do the interview? Why? And John, the father of JonBenet, is saying, we did it because, a buddy of mine said you have to. It's gonna help the image of Boulder, which doesn't make sense because you just went on TV and said there's a killer on the loose. That doesn't make people want to live in that city. So that was confusing to me. But that's from John's mouth. He said that in the interview with the Crime Junkie host. In this interview, they also announced that they're going a different route than the police, and they will be offering a reward if anybody can offer information, or obviously the killer. They offer their own reward. And let me see, I wrote lawyers connection to. Okay, yeah, that was notable. The lawyers had connections to Colorado politics. I don't know specifically what that means, like governors or mayors, but I think just generally speaking, which I was like, that's interesting. So take a mental note of that. After, like I said, lawyers and police are going back and forth about what's an appropriate setting to interview the Ramseys. Finally, in April of 97, they had an interview, sit down with the police. And then after that, another one in June of 98, and then a final one in the year 2000. And as far as what was talked about in those interviews, it wasn't, I didn't make any notes. I wish I knew because there's obviously a certain demeanor about police. I'm not a genius, but I wonder if you could tell if they're trying to pin it on you or if he's really going based off of what his friend said. I don't know. Anyway, so around this time as well, there's huge conversations happening surrounding pageantry. Because I didn't mention this before, but JonBenet was a pageant girl. She liked, I don't know if she liked it, but she did her dresses and her little outfits, and she did pageants with her mom. And there was a lot of scrutiny from the media on that because, and this is what I'm going to say, I'm very protective of children. Everybody either is or should be. And I personally am not a fan of pageants. I do think that it's an exploitation of children. That's my opinion. And whatever happened to JonBenet, listen, okay? It takes one person to become obsessed with your child and do something really dangerous. It just takes one. And I think that's the scary part about even parents and families that want to put their children on the internet. And every parent's different. Every family's different. And I'm not saying anything bad about families that do that or people that do that. I definitely see plenty of people doing it in a tasteful way, in a kid-friendly way. Some that don't, like Ren's mom, but let's not get into that because I'll be here all day. But for me, because you can call me paranoid, but I don't post my kid. I have pictures of him like on my personal accounts, but as far as like making videos with him, like I used to, but then I just took him down because I'm like, oh, it's like, again, it's one person that becomes obsessed with your child. To me, it's not worth it. That's just me, which sucks because I would love to share him with you guys. He is saying the funniest things at his age. I would love to put him on the internet and share his cuteness with the world, but the weirdos stop you guys from seeing that, unfortunately. So that being said, those are my thoughts on pageants. I'm not a fan. Do I think that Patsy was thinking of that at the time? No. I don't think that she put her in pageants to put her in harm's way. I just think she wasn't thinking. That's all. Was she doing it to live through her vicariously? Maybe. Was she forcing her to do it? I don't know. She kind of looked like she was having fun in those videos. Would I do it? No. Would I advise her to do it? No. These are just my thoughts. Anyway, so, oh my gosh, I forgot about this. Autopsy photos were released to the public at one point, and they almost printed them. The lack of respect on a deceased body, let alone a child, is so disgusting. I don't even have words. I'm just going to leave that there. I can't even. Wow. So there were also details about her autopsy results that were being leaked to the media by who? We don't know. The theory is the police department, but we don't know. So the detectives, first of all, each detective had a different account for how Dad was acting that night. Some detectives said he was cordial, some said he was a little too calm, and some said no, he was just trying to not lose his ish, which again, different perspectives. I don't know, because he has to keep it together for the family, but also your daughter's missing. Anyway, so Dad had also been freshly showered, and Mom had a full face of makeup. Take that however you want. He could have just been in the shower before she found the note. I guess she's from the South. Maybe she just puts on her. Would I be doing makeup or taking a shower if my kid's missing? Probably not. But take that how you will. So the basement and the window was broken. However, the same thing with the security cameras, where it wasn't just like it broke that night. It had been broken for a while. They just never fixed it. The note was left on the staircase, which actually, you know what? Let's look at the staircase for a second here. It's a spiral staircase. So I'm going to put the picture here of that exact. This is the crime scene photos, right? So I don't know how the pages didn't fall. Okay. We'll get into that. But that's the staircase. I'm going to put it right here for you guys to look at. The note, like I said, has been written from Patsy's notebook. And there was a page in the notebook where you could see they were starting to write Mr. and Mrs. and then crossed it out. And then ended up just putting Mr. Ramsey. So there was they were making drafts, I guess. And so, again, it's if the intention was to kidnap her, you would have something typed or you would bring a note with you. To write it in the home is where people get a little... That's where they kind of start to look at inside the family. And I'll be honest, if it wasn't for this damn note, I don't think anybody would be looking in the family. But maybe, the note is really the biggest thing. I think that the conversations are being had around. The Ramseys think that the intruder was at their house while they were at a party. And we'll get into the events that led to this night as well. Because they had been at a party the night before, came home, and that's when, everybody went to bed. I'll get into that in a bit, but that's their theory. Patsy, this is what it is. They said Patsy cannot be ruled out as the writer. Not meaning that Patsy wrote the note, but meaning that they can't rule her out, which is just a technical legal way of saying, you know, she didn't do it, but we're not going to say that just in case. We will be getting into the note and Patsy's handwriting with her right hand and her left hand on the Patreon, though. So if you want to get into that, head over there. All right. Next page. Oh, and then I forgot to mention this last note here. The $118,000 that they're asking for is the exact amount of John's bonus from January of that year. Like, it was somebody close to the family. Like, if it was either in the family or somebody close to the family. This wasn't a random person. Because how would they know that? So, I'm going to start getting into the details of what they found on her body and her autopsy. So, if you are still listening and you don't want to hear that, listen, what am I at right now? I'm going to try to read through this very quickly so you can just skip like a few minutes. All right. I'm just going to read it. So there was a device around her neck made of a broken paintbrush and a white cord called a garrote. The knots were not complicated. The paintbrush was from Patsy's art supply kit. There was also severe blunt force trauma to the head, and the cause of death officially was both. So it was severe blunt force trauma that was extenuated or made worse by the asphyxiation. There was no internal damage from the cord, meaning they weren't choking, meaning it wasn't too rough. However, there were external injuries around her neck, specifically hemorrhaging around her face. Police think that asphyxiation was 45 minutes after she was hit, and a detective on the Ramsey case thinks that she was hit after asphyxiation and that the asphyxiation was a sexual related thing. There was tape over her mouth. Dad took it off before bringing her upstairs. Her clothes were stained with urine on the front part of her clothing, but there are no stains on her bed. So most likely what happened was when she passed, she probably released her bladder, like what happens when you pass. There was vaginal trauma, traces of paintbrush as well in there. 7 to 10 days before death, they claimed that something else had happened because there was more vaginal trauma. JonBenet did have issues of having accidents in the bed. And there was fiber on the duct tape that matched Patsy's sweater she wore the night before, and it was on the inside of the duct tape. Many of the fibers found, however, were not tested. There was also foreign DNA. Oh my God. Under her nails, in her underwear, and on the cord around her neck. And then one of the things as well was there was remnants of pineapple in her system. And based on the area of her digestive system that it was found, it was concluded that she had had pineapple just a couple of hours prior to her passing. However, the Ramseys claimed that she went straight to bed. And she did not, I don't think she had pineapple at the party. So whoever did this to her obviously fed her first. I don't know. That's what that is kind of giving there. So JonBenet was last seen wearing a red turtleneck. However, that's what she went to bed in. However, when they found her body, she was wearing like a fairy nightgown type of thing. So that was interesting. Patsy did say that the note was the housekeeper, at one point she thought that, which I don't know why. So the dad said he went to bed around 10:30 after he read a book to JonBenet, which is weird because on another account he says that she was asleep already by the time they got home, so all he did was carry her to her bed and then read himself a book. He didn't read her a book. I don't know if the story changed or if detectives wrote it down wrong. I don't know. So later on, after this incident happens, there starts to be kind of like a divide between Fleet White and John Ramsey. And this could be a coincidence or not. I don't know. But altercations start to kind of go down between the two of them. And when asked about these altercations in the interview recently that he did with Crime Junkie, he claims not to remember what the fights were about. Which, to not remember the wording, okay, to not remember what the fight was about, period, I don't believe that, because these fights ended up leading to him and Fleet no longer talking for the rest of their lives. And let me tell you something, while you might not remember specific arguments on a day-to-day, an argument that you had that led to the demise of your relationship with somebody, friendship or romantic, you remember that. You at least know what it's about. I don't know, his memory is just... Anyway... So, one time the fight even got so bad that Fleet wasn't allowed on their plane when they were traveling. So, at one point, Fleet's wife turned to Patsy during one of those fights and said, you know, she knows what the fights are about. But Patsy, I guess, didn't ask. Anyway, this did eventually, like I said, lead to them no longer speaking, even to this day. The Ramseys go back once they're back from vacation, and they go back to live with the Steins after they're back from the trip. According to John, he never went back to the house and will never go back to. I don't know why he would. All right, so these are my notes for prior to the events that took place. On December 23rd, the Ramseys host a Christmas party. And interestingly enough, at this Christmas party, somebody called 911. Dispatch center has a call from that house, but the only thing was, it was like they called and hung up. This is at 6:48 p.m. The cops did end up going. There is record that the cops went to the home. However, they didn't write a report. So either they went, knocked, nothing happened, went home, or there was something to report and maybe they didn't write the report. But that doesn't make sense, because if the theory is that the police are trying to pin it on them, they would have written a report, especially if it made them look bad. So I think maybe nothing happened. So on Christmas Day, it's Christmas as usual. Kids come over in the morning, the neighborhood kids, after the kids open the presents. And then the evening is when they go to the Whites' homes. After they're done with the dinner at the Whites', they start going to homes and dropping off gifts at other friends' house. And the last friend's house that they visited was the Steins. So the Steins were the last people to see her alive besides the Ramseys. Besides the killer, obviously. We don't know who the killer is. I'm not sharing my theory on here. I'm going to share it on Patreon. And I don't even think I have a real solid one either. So Detective Steve Thomas. Oh, this is interesting. All right, guys, we're going to get into this. I was going to save this for the Patreon, but you know what? We'll talk about it here. So Detective Steve Thomas, I want you guys to remember that name. Okay, his theory is that Patsy did it because JonBenet had an accident, because like I mentioned, she had been having accidents in her bed, and mom snapped and then ended up staging everything. The only problem I have with this is there are no fresh stains on JonBenet's bed. If she had had an accident, you would have seen stains on the bed. Which I don't think that's... Whatever. I mean, again, she could have cleaned it. I don't know. That is Detective Steve Thomas's theory. And the detectives all could not agree on a theory, by the way. And in September of 1998, a jury gets called. A jury for what? I don't know. Because as far as I know, you have to have a suspect. And I don't know that the Ramseys were considered official suspects at this point. I know they were being questioned and each of them had their own lawyer, but I don't know that they were ever outright accused by the police, or if it was just the media. So at this point, as the jury getting called, 2 letters were released. These letters are very, very interesting and kind of add like a more dark, as if the story can get any darker. It adds an even darker twist. The first one was written by Fleet White. And this letter basically was saying, kind of like talking crap and going in on the Ramseys for not being more cooperative with police. And they're kind of saying like, Fleet's kind of saying like, well, if they're never going to solve the murder mystery if the Ramseys don't get it together and start cooperating with the police, is basically what Fleet was saying. So then we get into Detective Thomas's thing. So he was working on the case, and then he eventually took himself off the case. And then even after that, he ended up leaving the Boulder City Police Department. And nobody really knew why, at least the media didn't, until he released this letter. And in the letter, he states that the district attorney's office is mishandling the case. There are political alliances. The district attorney's office would not allow him as a grand jury witness. Search warrants were denied, and basically the DA is compromised. And that's an interesting thing, because if the police department is asking for a search warrant to search my home, for example, for the murder of... I'm not even going to say that. The DA's office would be like, yeah, search it. What's going on? But that would be like the DA being like, denying it and then telling them, go ask Julie yourself, or Jules yourself. And so I thought that was interesting, why the DA's office was denied. They were either... You can go with both theories. Either they were denying it because they knew the police were they were having tunnel vision and they just wanted to pin it and didn't want to actually look anywhere else. Or they were denying it because they were trying to protect the Ramseys because they knew there was some involvement there. I will be getting into the layout of the home, the letter, the handwriting, the theories on the Patreon. That, as far as right now, that is what I have on the JonBenet Ramsey case for the normal feed. As far as like updates for as of today, I am seeing on the media, like, oh, we're getting closer and closer to finding JonBenet's killer. And I have to say, for these people that are kind of like, leave it alone, let her rest in peace, listen here, okay? I'm gonna tell y'all something. If something ever happens to my child and I die and nobody ever knew what happened to my kid, I urge you guys to never shut the fuck up. Ever. Find my child's killer. And if you find my child's killer and the story helps raise awareness or let people know something or whatever, you have my blessing. Okay? So yeah, no, I'm not gonna not talk about this case, because as far as I'm concerned, the only reason the detectives even opened the stuff back up is because we're talking about it. So yeah, we don't have anything yet. We've had people try to confess over the years. Some guy was like, oh, I did it, but the DNA didn't match. Remember, guys, the one thing that kind of calls the intruder theory into question is the note. However, the one thing that calls into question that the Ramseys did it is the fact that there is foreign DNA in places of JonBenet's body that did not belong to anyone in the family. That calls into question the Ramsey doing it theory. That's why I'm confused. Okay? We don't know. Like I said, all my other theories, the note, the layout of the house, we'll get into that more on the Patreon. But as of right now, that is it for today's episode. And thank you again so much, you guys, for listening. Seriously. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, whatever you do on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Samsung Podcasts, wherever you do your listening. If this is too dark for you and you want to listen to like pop culture or chismeada gossip, feel free to check out my new podcast called Chisme and Chill. It's not spelled regular chisme. It's actually spelled like cheese, because I wanted to put like a spin and make it kind of punny. Cheese like that mouses eat. Anyway, I'll put the logo right here. But yeah, go ahead and feel free to check that out. There's only like 10 episodes. It's really new, but it's there for your listening. And if you want to subscribe to the Patreon, I do have it listed and posted at $5 a month, and you get bonus content. There's actually already like a bunch of bonus episodes over there that are not posted on the regular feed that you can listen to right now. And then, yeah, if you're going to head over to the Patreon and continue listening, I will see you over there. If not, you guys will hear from me next week. Thank you for continuing to cry with me, and goodbye.